What's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? I was a bartender bar manager. This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first. He would just take tips and we could renegotiate after he helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every weekend when people made requests for commonly known songs. He had no idea who they, the musicians, were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. He was a nice guy. Which is the only reason he lasted as long as he did. I was a florist and had a 40-something woman delivering for me. I received a call from the building manager of a brand new office building with only one tenant, telling me my driver wrote on the elevator wall with a Sharpie. They had video showing that she was the only person to use the elevator during the time the vandalism took place. The worst part for me was, this happened a few days before Valentine's Day. At a retail job, we had a kid come in and punch in for the day then go home. Would come back at quitting time and punch out. Fired a high schooler because his girlfriend kept showing up and they would disappear behind the racks. I told him his girlfriend was banned trying to not fire him and she kept sneaking back. Worked in an office and they hired a girl from a temp agency to help me. She wouldn't do anything unless I walked her through each step after telling her she had to do it. Hey, an estimate just arrived on the fax right next to you. Complete the quote and send it back. Come to find out she was playing Spider and Solitaire on her computer. She was also sneaking out back and the warehouse guys thought she was doing drugs. I told my boss get rid of her. I would rather work alone than babysit her, so he called the temp agency and told them to stop sending her. She showed up the next day, so boss sent her home and called the agency saying hey, she is useless, stop sending her. She showed up again the next day. This went on for over a week. The people at the temp agency said they told her to stop showing, but she kept coming in every morning. Mind you, usually 10 to 20 minutes late. My boss wouldn't say anything to her face, so finally I said hey, we can't afford to pay you, so we had to let you go through the temp agency. They should have told you. She was all oh, I thought they were joking. I was so glad she was gone. Years ago, at a lumber company, had a guy, less than 2 hours after he started on his first day, pick up his car with a forklift and stand underneath it to see what was rattling when he drove. I worked retail, and we had an employee that would hide and take naps inside racks of clothes. Somehow that wasn't the reason we fired her. We fired her for stealing clothes and then wearing them to work. Had an employee that was going to get fired for simply showing up late constantly with no legit reason. During the term meeting she tells me another employee cut the brake lines in her car. It's obvious this was to save her from being fired. She didn't realize that something like that gets cops involved. She was termed. And then detectives showed up to her house to get statements. Of course. No evidence of lines being cut, and now she's dealing with police for making false statements. Not too crazy. More stupid than crazy. One of the programmers on my team was sitting at his desk looking at porn. And this is cubicle land. No offices. My director walked into the area to talk to me and saw it. Then it was the first thing he told me about. So I got up and walked over for a look myself, and there it was. Me and the director looked at each and I said I got to take care of this. So we walked back to HR. I told them what was going on and what we saw, and they told me to fire him. So I did. He lost a $110K job for looking at porn on his computer at work. Once I had a guy call in sick to his restaurant bar shift right before his shift and then proceeded to show up poop-faced drunk for happy hour during the time he was supposed to be working. He was not a bright man. Dumbus stole a $100 bill out of the register at the end of his first shift alone on register. A guy trimmed off his pubes and left them scattered across a shared desk in a shared office. When confronted, he pulled a George Costanza. Oh. Is that frowned upon? CEO ordered me to fire one of my interns because he was trying to hit on one of the other interns the CEO had the hots for. My co-worker at a coffee shop. 1. Told a customer she didn't feel like making X drink and she should go elsewhere. 2. Wore Cookie Monster PJ pants while we had a very strict black or khaki pants. No jeans. No leggings policy at the time. 3. Couldn't figure out the concept of milk? Question mark. This still baffles me to this day. Like I was trying to show her how to steam milk properly. She was off in la la land and when she snapped back into the conversation asking, "What are we doing again?" followed by me reminding her and she quite literally asked what was in the gallon jug that I poured into the metal pitcher. I told her it was milk and she just looked at me. Her eyes saying, question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? She was there for 2 days. We had someone fall asleep at his desk with a lit cigarette in his hand. In an office full of cubicles like maybe 6-7 years ago. Smoking wasn't legal anywhere indoors, let alone in an office building. LMAO, and the first time he wasn't even fired. He was fired when it happened again. I work at an art studio where we teach classes and sell pottery that our artists make for others to paint. I'm one of the artists and the manager. I started getting a funny feeling about one of my employees. She wasn't doing anything blatantly wrong. Just seemed to work really slowly sometimes. Request insignificant but kinda odd schedule changes. And have different break habits from the other staff. I started feeling like she was stealing, but this is a really small business so I didn't have her on camera or any way to really prove it. Until she accidentally sent me a video of herself painting pieces that I made from her home. They stole a $3 bottle of wine that could have easily put on the house check for employees. Prep cook stole a 25-pound bag of onions. Fired a guy for looking to pay someone to cast black magic on the owner and the owner's family to bewitch them into giving him a raise, and ironically, never firing him. Only reason I found out was because he asked someone else in the office for help in finding a witch doctor to cast the spells and word got round. No one wanted to be in the same room as him after that. When I confronted him he said the devil made him do it so it wasn't his fault. I live in the Middle East. I definitely did not wake up expecting to fire someone for black magic that day. Side note, practicing black magic is literally a death sentence here. Hoo boy. I'd have to go with the guy who in the span of 24 hours started a fist fight with another employee, on camera. With witnesses, then called the police and said the other guy did it. Trying to press charges. I just sent the video. Trespassed on the property the following day and slurred at my boss, on camera. With witnesses. Then called the police and said my boss did it. I just sent the video. Hurt himself somehow and went to the hospital, where he told the doctor he'd been attacked at work. Doc found no injury consistent with his story and well yeah. Camera. The guy had somehow hung on by the skin of his teeth when caught making plastic model funny cars at his desk. Pro tip, throwing a newspaper over the model doesn't hide the smell of the glue. But when a client called complaining about our hero trying to sell him golf clubs out of the trunk of his car, he was gone. One of my ER nurses was chasing another down the hall with a scalpel in her hand screaming at the top of her lungs, "I'm going to cut you, bitch." Had to fire a guy for coming to work high on meth and getting lost in a closet while painting it. Asked what the deal was and was told SHHHH I am having a conversation. That was his last day. Mayo. I am a chef at an upscale restaurant. The sauté cook has a lobster dish on his station that involves a technique called deglazing that involves alcohol, so in turn the pan catches on fire briefly and flames up. When you do it correctly, hard to do it incorrect, the alcohol is cooked off and the flame goes out. Every time he made this dish he would deglaze the pan, catch it on fire and then blow it out. blowing his own germs and nastiness all over someone's food and everything in the blast radius. That was a week ago. Fired him after he did it multiple times after being asked not to. Maybe it's because of the current state of affairs. But I couldn't believe a trained cook would do that. In the early 2000s I managed a coffee shop that required the customers' names to be put on the cup. One guy looked like he was doing it, but upon closer inspection on some cups he was writing an IP address. Turns out he was running an illegal sports book out of the shop. He did quit before I had to technically fire him because he found out I knew. I worked at a retail store and found one of my co-workers was using the company iPad that we used to play music and order lunches to go on Craigslist and search for hookups. She didn't even bother to delete the search history. I work construction, and one of the subs gave me an invoice with no receipts. Turns out he wanted $30,000 for 4 weeks of work without paying the companies he rented equipment dumpsters from. I paid off the companies he owed money to and told him to frick off. I work for a hotel. Had to fire 2 separate employees on 2 different occasions for letting people in vacant rooms to smoke crack and steal from the rooms. He worked at the company for 2 weeks. Came to the Christmas party on Friday. Got poop-faced. Told the HR manager that she was a slut and would die alone. They had some previous vaguely romantic history. Went on a couple of dates or something. Tried to fight 2 of the customer service managers who asked him to calm down. And while being escorted out he turned to the CEO and COO and told them to go frick themselves. He showed up to work on the Monday talking about how fun the party was and how he had seen some people who would probably be called into HR that morning. He was the first and only employee to be called and was sacked on the spot. I worked at a pet store and was the lead cashier, so I had to train this girl who didn't think she had to abide by the uniform because it's just store name and doesn't count as a real job. That was a warning that despite her thinking she did need to follow the uniform rules. Then when ringing up customers she actually told customers they couldn't buy certain items because we were running low and she planned on getting a pet soon and wanted these items. I apologized and rung them up. Second warning with me explaining how that's not how it works and she could shop when she's off the clock. Finally my manager fired her when she tried to steal one of the cats that were up for adoption after being told she needed to wait for approval after they do a home visit and make sure she can care for the cat. Her excuse for trying to steal the cat? Her landlord doesn't allow pets, so she wouldn't be approved and she'd be a much better pet parent than anyone else who wanted the cat and much better than any of the customers we got. The girl didn't even last a week. When I was working at Burger King, our restaurant manager was away on maternity leave. So we had someone from another store coming over that time to fill the role. He ended up hiring someone who had worked there 5-6 years previously, high turnover. So a lot of hiring leaving. The few staff that had known her before she left hated her, but had no idea why she left. She even passed all the checks from head office before she was hired. Restaurant manager comes back about a month after she's been hired. Takes one look at her and rages. Like my RM is yelling at this girl. She's yelling at the manager that hired her and all the crew that had known her when she was here last. Obviously none of us knew what was going on. But it turns out this girl hadn't left. She'd been fired. And management at the time hadn't told anyone that. Just that she'd quit. This girl had scammed BK by pretending to be pregnant, fake ultrasounds, plans, baby shower, the whole lot, and then took paid maternity leave so she could go work somewhere else. Because it was seasonal work with better pay. With the idea of having a job for the off season to come back to. I have no idea how she got through the head office checks. But she was fired that day. Super impressive when you consider that I'm in New Zealand. So getting fired is usually a month plus long process here. Harassment. He harassed virtually every person in the department on sexual, racial and religious grounds. Human resources put up a fight while I had people crying and quitting because of him. A guy was hired at the metal fab shop I was working at. He had been laid off when we were slow. He was rehired on a Friday. Started Monday. Goes and does his drug test first thing. He failed. Apparently he had celebrated being rehired over the weekend. It was funny listening to my boss say, "Are you kidding me? You knew our testing policy. You couldn't wait 3 days?" Dart.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.